Yo, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be running one of the most fun builds that I've encountered in the DLC, and it's also one of the strongest. This is the type of build that as you play more with it, the better you get with it, the stronger it becomes, and it really just rewards good playstyle, good fundamentals, as well as good reads. So this is going to be the Rakshasa Great Katana, but it's going to have a twist. This weapon is already really nice as is. It has great hyper armor, it has a great moveset, gets the charged poke, which is super nice, and has this unique Ash of War, the Weed Cutter, which is phenomenal in multi-opponent situations as well as a wake-up. But that's not all. We do have on our main hand actually a Falx, and this weapon is a ton of fun on its own as well. It's a paired curve sword, so you get really nice running R1s, and you get pretty solid heavy attacks as well as jumping heavy attacks, and just really fast L1s that are super strong on their own, but mixed together these two are perfect. So you get this true combo, which is really nice. You get the offhand into the main hand, and that's going to do a decent amount of damage, but what comes next is up to you. I'm going to focus on 3 different options in terms of how you can really continue the pressure after you get this true combo. But first, let's go ahead and look at the build. So plus 10 weapons in both our hands, pretty standard for a level 139 build. We'll also be running the Imp Head as well as Tree Sentinel Armor, Gauntlets of Solitude, and Greaves of Solitude, and we'll be boosting our successive attacks by running Millicent's Prosthesis as well as the Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, and we'll boost our Poise as well as our Stamina and HP just by running the Erdtree's Favor +2, and that brings us to 115 Poise, which is going to be pretty nice. It means we can tank the first hit of a two-handed thrusting sword. So pretty solid, pretty normal setup here. You will note that we have a little bit of extra strength, so we have 25 strength, and the descaling in both these weapons for strength does make that a little bit better for AR. You can mix and match kind of depending on your overall level, but it's worth noting that sometimes the strength scaling is going to be helpful when kind of boosting your AR overall. So now let's focus on the really fun options you have with this moveset. So offhand, main hand, and then you can just kind of keep doing that chain. That's going to be kind of the most basic option you have available, and it works as a great roll catch, especially if your opponent tries to mash too. It can be great, assuming they don't have too much hyper armor, and that's just going to be very strong. But the next option is going to be to just start spamming with your main hand. So this can be really nice if your opponent is trying to delay their roll, which is a punish for kind of the first moveset. So if they try to delay their roll to miss the offhand Great Katana, then you can punish that by just going for a second R1 on your main hand. So a great option there. And then the most fun option, the one that I'm very excited about, is going to be offhand, main hand, L2. And you can time the amount of charge you put into your L2 to either go for, fully charge or just kind of stop it whenever you want. And that's going to allow you to get awesome chase downs. It does a bunch of damage. Usually I would say you can follow it up, kind of assume they're going to roll twice, and then release where you think they're going to be on their second roll, which usually isn't the fully charged version. It's very close, but not quite. So you'll get the hang of it as you use this more. And then it's also extremely fun because you can go for this and then go for the follow-up as well, which can do a ton of damage, but it does leave you open for quite a few punishes because it's really locks you into that animation for quite a while. So between these 3 different setups, you just have so many good options in your tool set for mix-ups to just really keep surprising your opponent. Speaking of that, I want to give a massive shout out to Painted Phantoms. If you don't know who Painted Phantoms is, you should definitely look up their extremely decorated history on YouTube. They've been one of the best competitive PvP players in Dark Souls 3, and really probably just didn't continue that due to having a slightly busier life in Elden Ring. So I see them in the arena fairly often, and it's always a pleasure to fight against them. And I was super happy to see that when I put this build together, they were actually already running it in the arena. And then they gave me a breakdown of how it works, which was invaluable in terms of how I learned to play this build. And I think that I could spend so many more hours just running this build and learning more from it. But a huge shout out to them. You should check them out. They're a phenomenal player. They know a ton about the game. And they've been running this setup since launch, so they definitely got dibs on kind of introducing it first into PvP. But it was very cool to see that a really good player also kind of had a similar mind about how this setup could work in PvP and be really strong. So Yeah, we both came to the same conclusion. They just came to that conclusion way faster. So yeah, I appreciate you sticking through this intro. I have some extremely fun invasions with this setup and also some ridiculous duels. So I'll hope you'll just kind of hang out through the end. And if you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I would appreciate it. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the showcase. All right, so our first invasion is going to be in the Tower Settlement. Definitely one of my favorite places to invade. Strongly recommend you invade there if you can. It's pretty popular, so if you want to invade locally, you can totally do that. But this is going to be a 2v1 for starters, and then we'll have a blue coming in soon enough. So we see the Phantom go for an incantation, and we take that opportunity to go for a backstab. We do manage to get the damage, but they're doing a great job of using both the stairs and random jumps to avoid our Ash of War. So that's going to be a great way to potentially avoid that Ash of War. If you can kind of judge when the timing of the L2 is coming out, you can definitely hop over it and sometimes get a jump punish. It is worth noting that the running during that L2 has super armor, so you can't punish that part, but after the hit is released, you can actually punish that. So we're able to eventually catch up to the Phantom and just kind of finish them off real quick. And that's going to be kind of the theme of the build, is like once you get a second or two alone to just pressure your opponent, you're going to be able to do so much damage, and more than their Estus is going to heal. So we see that with the blue, where we get just a number of very quick chase downs, and we opt to go for the running attack on the paired swords, just because once they're kind of already panicking, that running attack is going to do so much damage, especially with the Millicent's prosthesis. And now we have our Rune Arctos that's just running the Moog Spears, and we try to set up a backstab. They very smartly roll out rather than go for their Ash of War again, probably knowing that we were going to go for a backstab, and we managed to get them in the corner, get the pressure going, and then just finish them off and get a nice bleed proc at the end there. So that works out quite nicely. Alright, so our next one is going to be one of the scariest, blenderiest invasions I've had in a long time. So we're going to start things off with a sleep pot. Our opponent does unfortunately recognize that we're trying to get them slept and run away, and then we start getting hit with madness. So the floor is lava, but instead it's madness, is a difficult thing to deal with when you're in very low space. So we go ahead and run up the stairs and swap our talisman so we can get a little bit of HP back from our talisman, and we're going to need to just kind of reorient ourselves. And here the blender just starts happening, and I feel like it's like an ice cube in the blender, but then it just kind of pops out. So you forgot to put the lid on, and the invader does escape. So a nice moment there. I really thought I was a goner, but we went for that jump just kind of well timed, and now we go for a nice turn and burn with Weed Cutter. So this is one of the nice things about that Ash of War. It has a long startup but a massive reach, so you can go ahead and use it around corners to great effect. So we do see that there, and then we see the madness start coming in. So fortunately we're not actually taking any damage from that, and we go for our Ash of War just a number of times as an Albinauric pot hits us, and we're actually able to get 2 of the Phantoms very, very quickly. Now our madness meter is high, but we're not able to heal, which is quite unfortunate. So we go for what is kind of our best option in this situation, which is the Blessing. And that's going to give us full HP, so even though we can't heal, we are able to use that Blessing, and we can kind of reset back to neutral, be a little bit more aggressive here now that we're not running very, very low HP. And here we can see just our time alone with the Phantom is going quite well. We get the true combo. We don't manage to charge our Ash of War long enough, but we swap over to the Weed Cutter and just kind of continue that great Ash of War and get the finish there. Next up we'll have a 2v1, and this one I found to be quite instructive. We do see a big amount of pressure coming in from the Phantom very early on, and we really need to back up to avoid their Piercing Fang. But here we do start getting the pressure, and we can see the timing for the L2 is not quite right, so we end up missing that. They do go for the Bloodhound Fang Ash of War, which we're able to get a nice finish on, and then here we can see Weed Cutter as a wake up for that backstab. So Weed Cutter as a wake up for the backstab I find to be quite consistent. The range is really nice, and you can kind of just delay it a little bit and get yourself nicely set up for it. We do swap over to the two-handed paired sword mix-up, and then here we can see how nice it is to just swap back and forth between the Falx and the great Katana. You can just kind of keep going, and if they keep panic rolling, you'll keep hitting them. Next up we have a group of 2, and this one is going to be also fairly instructive, I found, mostly for dealing with the backhand blade and blind spot. So I definitely like this setup as a way to deal with blind spot. The backhand blade I know is pretty hated, I think, amongst most players. It's very strong. But first we'll need to deal with this Phantom. So we do avoid the blind spot from the host. We switch over to the power stance curve swords and manage to get this player to very low health. We do need to look out for the incantation, but then we're going to want to back up. We do see a hunter summoned into the world, but that's not really going to matter for us. We're now just focusing on this player with the backhand blades. And here we can see the blind spot being very strafable, so if we had gone for a hit there, I think we would have definitely gotten a nice punish. And then we can also neutral jump it. So I think neutral jumping is quite strong against blind spot, and as our opponent switches over to the martial arts, we're going to be able to go for our true combo, switch over to the paired swords, and I definitely like the ability to use handy tech between two really good chase down weapons. The running attack on the Great Katana is phenomenal, and the running attack on the paired curved swords is also phenomenal. So that's going to be very nice, and we can go ahead and just trade a little bit as our opponent has almost 0 HP, and one hit will do it. Our next invasion is going to be a tricky 2v1 where we have one opponent running the Mirai's Executioner Sword, which comes with phenomenal hyper armor, and then we see a mixture of the backhand blades as well as Reduvia from the host, which is definitely the most scary situation. So we're going to be able to get our Phantom to pretty low health, but the host does do a good job of coming in and saving them. And then here we can see our ability to trade with blind spot to be pretty decent with the offhand Katana, just because that big sweep will usually catch a player that's running a blind spot as their Ashavor, and the trade does result in a true combo for us, so that's pretty nice. Once Reduvia starts coming in, we need to play pretty carefully. It's hard to aggress on these two opponents given the amount of hyper armor that you get from the Mirai's Executioner, as well as just, you know, your ability to span Reduvia unpunished for a while. So doing a soft swap over to my Misera Cord that does have Thunderbolt on it wouldn't be a bad idea, but fortunately we are able to grab our attack chain that we love so much with the offhand Katana, the main hand true combo, followed up by our L2. Now the host does do a good job of backing off, but the pressure is too much when it's just a one-on-one. They get caught on the wall, and we finish them with a two-handed attack from our Katana. So really nice moment there, and just a good way to deal with the pressure of a group of two. Our next group is going to be a group of 3, and this will be a nice demonstration of working around the hyper armor. So our first opponent here is not going to be too valid, I would say. They get hit with the full combo, and then they get sneezed on by the PvE, so we don't really need to worry about them, but then we get rot sneezed on by one of the other players, so we do need to heal that up real quick. So we're going to go ahead, back off. We have an opponent running a flail, which is not super scary. I mean, it's not the worst weapon in the game now, but it's really not top tier either. But our opponent here with the Smith Script Hammer is going to be the one we're going to need to look out for. And you know, this is when I think the versatility of the build really shines. Like, we have an option that's quick, we have an option that has, you know, very little hyper armor but is still strong, like the main hand curved sword, and then you have the Rakshasa Great Katana, which has the Weed Cutter, which is just like the ultimate hyper armor situation. And using that to your advantage is going to be really nice, especially against a player that can kind of just mash into you continuously. The crazy hyper armor on Weed Cutter is invaluable in moments like this where you can just kind of spam it, and if they keep attacking, they're going to be in trouble, and then you have that quick option of the curved sword to just chase them down and finish them off. So here we go for the kind of 1-2 punch situation with the host, where we're able to hit them with the main hand, then the offhand, and the main hand, and we do that until they're out of range, and then follow it up with a Katana attack. Next up, we'll be against a group of 3, and these players were definitely pretty challenging. We had a fairly passive host that was sending a lot of high damage projectiles our way, especially with Moonlight Greatsword. We had one player who was definitely skilled at PvP. That's going to be this player with the Great Katana, and they're doing a good job of just kind of delaying their hits, not being too predictable, and getting some nice roll catches on us as we try to back off. So due to the host and the player that's pretty solid with their Great Katana, we're gonna try to retreat a little bit into an area with some PvE. The third Phantom, or the third player in this world, is just kind of a real mixed bag. Don't really know what to expect from them, but they're also not super challenging. We try to roll in and grab a backstab with our Misera Cord, but end up whiffing it and then collecting a lot of damage from the host as well as the Phantom. Now, we are going to see some more incantations coming in from the host, and we're in kind of a dangerous area. They are all just kind of funneled in front of us, which is preferable to getting flanked by them, but it's tough to run into this, especially when you have the host running projectiles. The player with Giza's Wheel does go for their Ash of War, which just immediately triggers some alarm bells in my mind, thinking that it's Chainsaw, but it is in fact the totally legal Giza's Wheel. We are able to get a nice strafe backstab there on the player with the Great Katana, and actually get our L2 to connect with the player with Giza's Wheel. So we're down to just 2 players, but we're not totally out of the woods yet. We managed to land our Frost Pot before this Phantom is able to land theirs, and we get them to very low health, but the just high damaging Moonlight Greatsword is coming in from behind and hitting us so hard that we really need to back off, despite the fact that we'd love to be super aggressive there. So it's worth noting that the Phantom just used a raw meat dumpling, so we know that they're out of flasks. We can see that they got poisoned and they got some health back, so that's just good knowledge to have. It also just kind of speaks to their ability to play PvP. I feel like having that in mind definitely signifies a player that's pretty decent. They also do switch over to Shamshir, which is not quite as strong in this patch as it used to be, but it's still a good weapon, especially when two-handed, and we'll need to respect that a little bit. Fortunately, we can trade with our offhand Katana, which does have hyper armor, and then go for some hits with our paired greatsword. And here we just kind of trade into their Ash of War, kind of clip them before they're able to really get the full hyper armor, which is very nice. Sword Dance can do a ton of damage. And then here we set ourselves up for a big heal with all the items to boost that as much as possible, and we get back to full health. So having that as an option is always quite nice, and we can go ahead and continue the chase down. This is potentially one of the most brave hosts I've ever seen. They come like just flying into an area with tons of PvE with very little health and seemingly no plan, but we finish them off and can move on to the next one. So this is going to be a group of 3 that just, I don't know, I don't think they were really PvP really prepared. We're going to go ahead and use our Great Bow just to kind of let them know that we're in the world, we're ready to fight, and yeah, if they want to come hang out, I am available. So I'm going to go ahead and swap off the Great Bow. It is worth noting with this setup, you need to swap your offhand weapon to the Great Bow to not be heavy rolling. In that moment, I figured I had enough time, so I just used it in my main hand and swapped back. Fortunately, we're able to finish off one of the Phantoms pretty fast. We get hit with Moonveil, but the PvE does come in and just grab a hold of the host and do a significant amount of damage, and we're able to get a little bit more damage off on the Phantom and finish them off. And then here was a phenomenal ending to just a very happy invasion where the PvE with the pot just chucks their pot and finishes off the host. So love to see it, and very good times. Next up we have again a pretty silly invasion. I enjoyed this one, but it just kind of speaks to the uselessness of blues. So one blue comes in. We do need to look out for that Ash of War from the host. They go for it with no FP, which is unfortunate. Fortunately, we're able to interrupt this player's guard counter, then get the guard break, and then get the finish with the Falx, and we can just kind of focus on the host now. But we do see that a blue has come into the world, so we're going to try to set up a nice little backstab to see if we can just, interrupt their ability to play. The host does a great job of using their Ash of War with the Rolana Twin Blades and, punishing the fact that I go for a crit, so that's a great way to get a punish, especially on a backstab, and really any critical attack can be punished with that Ash of War. So we see them go for it again, but this time I'm not stuck in a long animation, so I can go ahead, throw a sleep pot. They don't get slept, but we do have a substantial amount of sleep buildup, and if we go for another pot, we feel we'll be in business here. So we do get them slept, and here we see another blue come into the world, and predictably they are also AFK. So we go ahead and just start weed cuttering them. We don't get more than one hit to connect, but we continue the Weed Cutter L2 game, which does quite a bit of damage, gets them to one hit, and we can follow it up with a nice light attack on the Great Katana. And now it's just a one-on-one with the host. Their ability to summon AFK blues is non-existent at this point, so we can ravioli step into them for the finish And yeah, I just found that one pretty amusing. Moving on, we're going to have the duel portion of the showcase. Our first opponent is going to be running the build I call Miyazaki's Dream. So that's going to be the spread crossbow with sleep bolts on it and then an offhand fingerprint shield. To counter this, we need to remove the helm that decreases our focus and swap our Misericord over to one with kick. We're able to tank one hit from the spread crossbow, get our kick in, and then finish the riposte. And then we can go ahead and swap our helm back to the one that we really liked. So just be on the lookout for that. It's very dangerous, but it can be countered. Okay, so that wasn't really showcasing the build, and now we're going to take a look at how much damage this can do. So this player just whiffs their running attack, which results in a ton of damage, and then they try to trade with this build. And we can see how quickly we're able to flawless an opponent and get in roughly 2,000 damage. Next up, we're going to see a player running Power Stance Cross Naginatas, which we definitely need to respect. They still do a lot of damage, they still do a lot of bleed, but they're not as good as they used to be. So we're going to switch to the two-handed moveset, swap over to the one-handed moveset, get our true combo in, follow it up with our Ash of War, and go for the full thing and just flawless this player as well. So yeah, you can see this is a pretty strong setup. Our next opponent is going to be running the Greatsword of Solitude and going for a lot of guard counters, so we're going to try to punish that pretty early on. We go for one hit, they go for the guard counter, we go for a jumping attack, they go for a guard counter again, which sets us up nicely for a backstab. And that also sets us up nicely for a chase down with the Ash of War on the Falx. They do go for a third guard counter, but this time we're able to interrupt that with our follow-up attack on the Ash of War, and it's GG's. Our next opponent is going to be running a Frost Incantation Power Stance Curve Swords mix-up build, I'll call it. And we're going to need to try to avoid the frost damage as we go for a backstab. We don't get it to connect, but we do look out for their Ash of War. And here we think they're going to be a little bit more aggressive, so we eat Adula's Moonblade as they just kind of whiff punish us. So we're going to need to back off a little bit, but once we start kind of getting this build going, we're going to be in great shape. So here we're able to bait a roll and then go for our offhand Great Katana attack, follow that up with a few quick swings, and it's GG's. And yeah, so really just the pressure on this is kind of insurmountable if you're not ready for it, and it's very hard to play against. Our next opponent is going to be running a Katana. They go ahead and eat an early hit. They do delay their roll so they don't get hit by the 1-2 combo, but this time we mix it up and go for an L2, and as they try to parry us, we've delayed our attack long enough where we're able to actually get the finish with the L2. Our next opponent is running Power Stance Great Katanas, which is something I haven't tried and really look forward to trying. I think it seems like a pretty interesting high damage moveset. We go ahead and hit them with the true combo, followed up by the L2, and then get a couple quick swings in. And yeah, it's not that hard, honestly, with this build. It's really strong the more you use it, but the barrier to entry is pretty low once you kind of get the basic ideas of it. And here we're able to run in, grab our L2, and finish this player off. And like, I definitely did lose some invasions, but it was pretty infrequent. I would say hyper armor was a big way to counter this, where you can just mash in with like a really strong hyper armor based weapon, but this also has good hyper armor options between the offhand Great Katana, just having innate hyper armor. Weed Cutter has crazy hyper armor, and then the L2 on the Falx also has super armor if you're in the running animation. So all those different options just make this so strong, and then you have just great mix-ups with it, great poise breaks. I think it's 110 is the poise break on the Falx one-handed, so not a ton of people are running over 110 poise, and it's just strong. It's like, it doesn't take a ton of effort. You have so many good mix-ups. Yeah, I just can't really speak too highly about this build. I was kind of sad to finish this build because it meant that I needed to run a different one, and I feel like I could run this for a very long time. It's really just, it's so much fun, and it feels so strong. So our next opponent is going to be running a Halberd offstock, which is definitely pretty meta. They're doing a good job of trying to space us, but once we get that offhand hit in, it's so hard to recover from that. The pressure is so strong, and the number of different mix-up options are kind of unbelievable. So that's going to cover our dual showcase of this build. And if you have any questions, let me know. If you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I would appreciate it, and I hope you have a good day.